Tonight we're on the coast of northern Oman and we are looking for the black-tailed alligator back scorpion. This is quite an iconic species in this region, and I first encountered them about 3 years ago and have seen quite a few of them since, so we should have no trouble finding a few of them here tonight. We have our first Hottentotta jayakari down here under this ledge. Let's see if we can get it out. Got it. Looks to be a female. In addition to being called black-tailed alligator back scorpions, these are also sometimes referred to as Iranian alligator back scorpions. But that name more often refers to an entirely different looking scorpion from, you guessed it, Iran. The reason that these scorpions and others in the genus Hottentotta are referred to as alligator back scorpions is because they have these pronounced dorsal ridges. These ridges are referred to as carinae, and they also show up on other parts of the scorpion's body as well. These carinae can be quite useful in helping to identify certain species of scorpions, but the ones on the dorsal surface are not used as often. Also, I should have started by saying that the ridges that we see on this scorpion that give it its name are not unique to this scorpion and others in the genus Hottentotta. Many other scorpions have this appearance as well, especially in the family Buthidae. Speaking of identification, these scorpions are extremely easy to recognize in Oman. The only other scorpion in Oman that looks fairly similar is the closely related Hottentotta sally, and that one is geographically isolated from this one, and I'll expand on the biogeography of this species when we find the next one. This is a pretty cool find. Here in this bush, we have a Psammophis schokari, just sleeping. This one is just a juvenile. They do get to be over 1 meter long. These are commonly known as four-skull sand snakes, and as I said, it is a juvenile, but luckily with this species, the juveniles don't look much different from the adults, so we're not really missing out on much, having not found an adult. This snake has quite an immense distribution. In fact, it might have one of the largest of any species around here. It lives across North Africa, the Middle East, and parts of South Asia, and lives in pretty much any desert environment in those regions. Serpent biodiversity is not super high in the Hajar mountains. As such, this is one of only 2 species of snakes in this mountain range that is strictly diurnal. The other one being the cliff racer, which is far more common around here. By the way, one thing that's pretty interesting about the cliff racer is that it's usually faintly banded, but there is a patternless variant in the Hajar mountains that happens to be the most similar looking snake to the one that we have right here on the Arabian Peninsula. Even though, as we saw, these sleep in bushes at night, they're an almost fully terrestrial species, but despite spending so little time actually moving through shrubs and trees, they're quite well adapted for it. We have a Hottentotta jayakari back there, but far less common right here is Latrodectus cinctus, the local widow species. And this black widow, or button spider, is the more common of the 2 native species that can be found in Oman. Basically, any pile of rocks that creates shade is an auspicious place to look for them. And what's unfortunate about that is most of the habitats around here that fit that description have anthropogenic origins. What I mean by that is many piles of rocks around here originate from buildings falling over. And as is the case with many button spiders, the biogeography of this species is enigmatic to say the least. They live throughout much of the Middle East, but somehow also in Cabo Verde, Liberia, and South Africa. That's roughly 3 populations that are fairly distant from one another. The specific epithet cinctus is a pretty common one. It means belted or banded. In this case, it refers to the red dorsal stripe, of course. This right here on this umbrella thorn branch is a giant antlion. Absolutely no idea what the species is, but let's see if I can get it to crawl onto my finger. This is one of the larger species I've seen out here. Perhaps something closely related to palparis, I'm not too sure. Antlions in my experience have been a pain to identify, not just at the species level, but even at the genus level. I know antlions never get any representation on this channel, but the reason I am stopping to look at this one, of course, is due to its sheer size. There aren't too many antlions in the world that get much larger than this. Palparis, which is the one I was mentioning earlier, is one of them though. Antlions in general are quite common around here. In fact, I've seen many dozens at this point, but this is the only time I've seen this species so far. whatever it is. And based on what we know about larger antlions, this species is likely not responsible for any of the cones that you can see in the ground around here. We have our second black-tailed alligator back scorpion down here. Appears to be already upset with me. These are found in the Hajar mountains of Oman and the UAE, and they're also found in the extreme southern extent of the Zagros mountains in Iran. There are a lot of species that are endemic to the Hajar mountains, but also quite a few that have a second metapopulation in southern Iran. And this is because the bases of those two mountain ranges used to be connected by low plains before the last glacial maximum. In fact, for much of the Pleistocene, the entire Persian Gulf was a basin of dry plains. So the most narrow point between these two mountain ranges used to act as a corridor for many species to disperse from one range to the other. And today that narrow point is known as the Strait of Hormuz, and it's about 50 or so kilometers wide. So this means that at one point the distribution of this scorpion was at least a little bit more extensive than it is today. Another piece of evidence that points to this is the small population that's found in Qatar. Hottentotta jayakari was officially discovered in 2020 just outside of the capital city, Doha. Since then, multiple individuals have been found in the same area. That third population is the most isolated, and it's also one that, to my estimation, is at risk of extinction. Something that I don't think is too unlikely to occur in the next couple decades. Down here is a tarantula in the genus Ischnocolus. And this one is almost fully grown, not a very large species at all. And this Ischnocolus species is unassigned or undescribed, and it appears to be endemic to the Hajar Mountains. I believe it's the only tarantula species found in the Hajar mountain range, and the only tarantula in general that can be found in the Emirates, and one of 3 that's found in Oman. The other 2 in Oman are found in the Dhofar mountain range. I saw this species in the Emirates several years ago. It seems that they're quite easy to find during the rainy season. They were quite common underneath rocks, and it appears that this tarantula is variable because the ones I found up north were quite blue compared to the ones that we have here. This isn't really a burrowing species. Instead, they like to live in crevices between rocks with very small webs at the entrance, and sometimes under cement as well, which is not too surprising. But the reason I point this out is because one of the easiest ways to find these around here is by searching along the side of the highway, since there's a crevice between the dirt and the edge of the cement, and many of the Ischnocolus are living in there. In more natural areas, these do have an affinity for wadis, but they can be found in hyper-arid environments, the likes of which very few other tarantula species in the world can survive in. Right down here on the ground, we have a scorpion in the genus Rhodorhachis. These are very small. This one is an adult. This Rhodorhachis, or pillar-tailed scorpion, should be Rhodorhachis glabrifrons. It was described out of Muscat, the capital, which is about 2 hours north of here, and over there they seem to be significantly more common than they are here. There were some occasions when I was able to find 3 living within a meter of one another. They seem to be most common underneath umbrella thorns. These groups of 2 to 3 pillar-tailed scorpions suggest that this species is highly tolerant of its conspecifics, which checks out because it's been found that other Rhodorhachis species can live alongside one another without any issues. They can be described as aggregative but not social. There are over 50 described species of pillar-tailed scorpions, but relatively few of those are known from the Arabian Peninsula, this being one of them, of course. And part of the reason for this is because there are still several in the region that are undescribed, especially in Saudi. Down here on this rock we have a Pristirus, or semaphore gecko. This one's going to be something related to Pristirus rupestris, which is the rock semaphore gecko. But the biogeography of Pristirus in the eastern Hajar mountains is pretty messy, so the identity of this one is uncertain. And the one that we're looking at here is an adult. All of the semaphore geckos in Oman are fairly small, with the exception of Carter's semaphore gecko. This genus contains the smallest vertebrate species on the Arabian Peninsula. If we look at the eyes of this lizard, you'll notice that its pupils are not quite the same as those we've seen on other Middle Eastern geckos, and that's because this is a cathemeral species. And even though it's cathemeral, many of its traits are more aligned with diurnal geckos rather than nocturnal ones. So besides the shape of the pupils, you can also see that their toes are quite thin, and this is despite the fact that they spend a lot of time up on vertical surfaces such as rocks. But anyway, their activity seems to be 50-50 between day and night, so it's a bit surprising to see just how well adapted they are for diurnal activity. We have a Sphodromantis trimacula on this branch here. This is the largest species of mantis in Oman, and quite possibly the Arabian Peninsula in general. It's also the easternmost ranging species in the genus Sphodromantis, as it can be found in Iran, which I believe is also the place where it was first discovered. But otherwise, the species can also be found in the Emirates, Yemen, and KSA. This genus is mostly restricted to Africa, especially in its native range. And these mantises are not always green like the one that we have here. If I understand correctly, the brownish-gray variant of the females is more common. The shrubs and bushes in this area are also a drab brown color, so for a number of days I've been checking them to see if I could find one of these mantises. Ultimately I came up empty-handed, although I did see a very large number of their egg cases. So I decided that I had to switch up my strategy a little bit, and it only took searching 2 green trees before I found my first individual, and then this one that we have here was found on the 3rd tree that I checked. The irony though is that for some reason the egg cases are fairly difficult to find in the green trees where the mantises are, and they're very common in the gray trees where there are no mantises, at least at this time of the year. Down here on this stone, we have a Crotogonus species, and I believe in this area it should be Crotogonus homolodemus. And these are the most cryptic orthoptera that you can find in this area. These have a bit of a rare shape among grasshoppers, not just here, but in general. You can see that it's quite wide, especially behind the thorax, and this gives it a bit of an oval shape. This is an adult female. In the males, this shape is a little bit less exaggerated. These are also some of the most successful grasshopper species that are in this region. They're fairly common around here, and I have to imagine that there's also quite a few that I'm overlooking since they are quite well camouflaged. Speaking of which, like many stone grasshoppers from around the world, many of which are completely unrelated from one another, these match the appearance of their local rocks. We have our 3rd and final Hottentotta jayakari down here. Also an adult. Regarding the distribution I was talking about when we found our last Hottentotta, these are the most common scorpions throughout much of it. This is certainly true for Oman and the UAE, and this species likely accounts for the plurality of scorpion biomass in both of those countries. Part of what makes it so successful is that it's a habitat generalist. In fact, any desert that's below 1,000 meters in elevation and not too sandy is auspicious for these scorpions. These areas that I speak of can be incredibly barren and may only receive a few centimeters of rain in a year over the course of just a few days. These scorpions are quite frequently dusty. In fact, some of them have a layer of silt caked onto their back. Ours have not been too bad, especially the first one, but I still want to show you its true colors, so to speak. So I'm going to wash our scorpion. And here it is. Took a couple minutes to dry, and the difference isn't too crazy. As I mentioned, ours was not overly dusty to begin with, but there you have it. It was definitely not worth losing all of my drinking water, but oh well. We have a Trachydactylus hajarensis here on this rock wall, a very nice species of gecko. These are commonly known as banded ground geckos. Not the best common name though, because that already refers to a certain species of eublepharid from Southeast Asia. And this species of gecko is of course named after the Hajar mountains, hence the specific epithet hajarensis. And like many of the smaller animals in this region, it is endemic to that mountain range. Additionally, the genus Trachydactylus only contains 2 species. The other one is found in the Dhofar Mountains of Oman and Yemen, so this genus is entirely restricted to the southern Arabian Peninsula. What's somewhat unique about the geckos in this genus is their tail. Of course, like many other geckos, they do wiggle it from time to time, but you'll notice that the tip of the tail is rounded off, as if a piece broke off at some point and then it healed. But actually, this is its natural appearance. Of the species of geckos that can be found in Oman, these perhaps have the most tuberculation of any of them. You can see it has quite a rough appearance. The only other geckos that come to mind that are similar are the other Trachypterygium species and the tuberculated gecko. Well, those are all of the black-tailed alligator back scorpions that we are going to find tonight, although I'm sure we could have found many, many more. So hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.